So at the Barrow, we do more surgeries related to brain tumors than anywhere else in the United States. We're also housing the Muhammad Ali Parkinson's Center, and also we've created a world premier center for ALS clinical trials and research studies. So joining me here today is Dr. Tina Moen, who is the Deputy Health Officer of IBM Watson, and also Doug Clow, who is a local ALS patient and is being cared for here at our clinic by Dr. Latta, who is also here today. I also want to welcome, at least in a virtual way, IBM Watson. And so we'll hear a little bit and see a video about IBM Watson in a few moments when Dr. Moen speaks. I also want to thank and welcome Betty Vandenberg, who is here today. So the Vandenbergs have been tremendous donors and participants in our path forward as we work in creating a larger and better ALS center to help our local patients here, as well as make new discoveries and new treatments for ALS that will help patients around the world. So again, Betty, thank you so much for being here today. So before I announce and describe this breakthrough scientific discovery that we've created here at the Barrow in partnership with IBM Watson, a little bit about ALS for those that may know less about the disease. So ALS really is one of the worst diseases out there. And it can strike anyone at any time. It often hits people at around the mid-50s, but again, can really strike anyone at any time. See patients as early as 17, 18, and as late as in their 90s. So it hits and strikes anyone. It's a devastating disease, fatal disease. We only have one FDA-approved drug for this disease, and it only slows disease progression by a few months. So there's a desperate need for improved discoveries, scientific discoveries, to uncover the mechanisms of disease, and also new discoveries and new treatments, improved therapies for this disorder. And it's what myself, members of our team, other scientists and clinicians around the world, and obviously the patients and their families, what we hope to accomplish. And so that was one of the key things of why we started working and partnering with IBM Watson. So we wanted to accelerate our discovery process. And so we wanted to use IBM Watson to help us explore new angles and help us discover new insights into the disease in a far more rapid way than we could individually. Of course I didn't turn off my phone. Meant to do that. So again, what were we doing in this study? So we reached out and we talked to IBM Watson. And what has been known in probably the last 5-10 years is there's been a group of genetic mutations that have been identified and linked to ALS. These genetic mutations all revolve around a class of proteins that are called RNA binding proteins. And so there was an understanding from this group of discoveries over the past 5 to 10 years that maybe this process, which is called RNA metabolism, might be important or is important for the disease. Now, unfortunately for the scientists, there's about 1,500 genes in our human genome that encode for all these RNA binding proteins. So we knew a few, but the question was, out of these other almost 1,500, are any of those also linked to ALS? And so for me and my team, to explore all those genes would take years. And what we look to is, can we use IBM Watson and its cognitive computing capacity to accelerate that process? Could IBM Watson look at all the published literature out there and come up with inferences and make logical predictions of all the other genes for RNA binding proteins as to whether or not any of these might be associated with ALS? And so working with their team during the past year, we explored this question with IBM Watson. So at the end of the day, Watson gave us a list and said, these are the ones that I predict would be linked to ALS. So then my team went out and set out to try to validate those findings. Could we actually see differences in these RNA binding proteins in patients with ALS? And I'm very happy to announce that out of the top 10 hits generated from IBM Watson, 9 out of the 10 are in fact actually changed in ALS patients. And out of that group of 10, 5 had never been before in any way linked to this disease. So Watson accomplished exactly what we hoped it did. It could identify and predict things that we ourselves had no idea were linked to this disease. So where is that leading us? Well, it's a great scientific breakthrough for this disease. It's enabling us to look more closely at this mechanism, to make additional links to the mechanism, and actually we're finding other cells in our nervous system that seem to be affected by this disease based on these findings. So it's quite exciting. What we hope to do then is now look and how do these new discoveries and new data actually converge together. Is there a convergence point in this pathway that now becomes druggable? Can we develop new therapies based on this convergence point? And we hope to continue our work with Watson to explore exactly that. How can we upload some of our additional data that we've generated in the lab, some of the clinical information from our clinicians here at the center, and come up with this convergence point and use Watson to help us identify new drugs that we think might target this pathway, and therefore we can test in our models. Now again, it's not a discovery that leads to new drugs overnight, but it's an important breakthrough that allows us greater insight into this disease and also will lead us to new therapeutic targets. So I think with that, I'll again move over and allow Dr. Moen to describe a little bit more about IBM Watson.
Further the efforts to make a difference in the lives of patients and the families with this devastating disease. So it's our honor, and I look forward to continued work together. Interestingly, the partnership with Barrow Institute is IBM Watson Health's first official collaboration with an institute dedicated to understanding neurological diseases. So really, really exciting, and hopefully a lot more to come between us and for this partnership. Before I talk about Watson for drug discovery specifically, I'd really like to introduce you to Watson. Before anybody asks how we get access to the Watson for gift buying, considering the season, I think everyone is, I need that as well. Everyone, of course, is very excited in the healthcare space about the ability for Watson to help improve outcomes, improve lives, and help to keep us all healthier and to help folks with devastating diseases such as ALS. So, you may recognize Watson from the Jeopardy show 5 years ago. Watson appeared on Jeopardy, competed with human contestants, and Watson won. in 2011. It really was a public demonstration of the really hard work that IBM, Watson, computer scientists and data analysts and researchers put into solving a really complex problem, which is natural language processing. And the outcome was demonstrated really meaningful experimental results, which then IBM took to the next level and started expanding into other avenues beyond Jeopardy. So I'll show you a quick clip of the Jeopardy show as well.
Alternate means 400. Four-letter word for the iron fitting on the hoof of a horse or a card dealing box in a casino. Watson.
What is it, Chu?
You are right. You get to pick.
Literary character, APB, for 800.
Answer the Daily Double.
I think that's it. So Watson won Jeopardy, which was very exciting, of course. But then the next step was really to what can we do with that to change things in the world and solve difficult problems. Watson's win on Jeopardy really demonstrated its ability to understand complex language, which is really key and different from a lot of other technologies that we've seen. The question response format of Jeopardy really requires very high precision, and so that understanding of complex language is essential. For example, we can use search engines. We're all used to using search engines to find a document out on the internet, but you still have to read the document to be able to pull out the information that you were looking for, to be able to pull out the appropriate answers. So that's where Watson comes in and helps with really difficult problems across various industries. So after winning Jeopardy in 2011, as I said, the goal was for IBM to think about what industries Watson could be deployed to start solving difficult challenges. You saw in the first video, it's really across a variety of industries, weather and governments and healthcare and science. We wanted it to be more than a question and answer solution. We really wanted it to understand complex language and have a profound impact on how businesses run their day-to-day operations, how they research links to genes in different disease states, how it identifies genomic patterns in patients with cancer and a variety of things like that. As a clinician, I'm really thrilled that IBM pointed Watson in the very early days, first real-world application at healthcare, and I think this will be something that will help really make a difference to the lives and the health of people around the world. So fast forwarding to today, we're seeing the power and the promise of Watson start to come to life in a lot of different avenues around the world, again, with different businesses, different industries, as we saw in the video, scientists, researchers, governments, really working together, as Dr. Bowser described, working together with folks who are trying to solve difficult problems so that we can outthink those challenges. To the specific example, which has been so fantastic in demonstrating the power of Watson and the power of a collaboration between folks taking care of patients around the world and Watson Health. Traditional research tools for folks like Dr. Bowser and others are quickly becoming inadequate for the pace that the market needs, that our patients need to be able to find discoveries and make new inferences to make differences in the lives of people. There's billions of documents, billions of articles published around the world, and Dr. Bowser and his team would probably never get to sleep and never get to eat and never get to see their families if they were trying to keep up with the pace.
That's true already.
It is already.
Yeah, okay.
We're working on that. To keep up with the pace with the amount of literature that's out there, not to mention make connections that sometimes the human brain just doesn't make on its own, and that's really the power of Watson and natural language processing and machine learning, can make inferences, make connections, see patterns that humans may not see or may never see, but also may not see as quickly as Watson can see. So Watson for Drug Discovery, what is it? It's a cloud-based solution, aims to help researchers discover these links and inferences more quickly. looking for new drug targets, looking for additional drug indications for already approved drugs, looking for connections that can lead to that next scientific breakthrough so that something can be brought to the market more quickly for patients and their families. The drug development, drug research process is very long, very costly, and very complex because of all of this literature that's out there and all of the nuances that can potentially be impacting the progression of a disease. So by tapping into Watson's machine learning, the natural language processing, and other cognitive technology, Watson helps people like Dr. Bowser and his team find those new insights and be able to get started on the what's next more quickly and be able to bring things to the market, bring novel new therapy opportunities and new approaches to disease treatment much more quickly. Watson for Drug Discovery analyzes scientific knowledge, as Dr. Bowser mentioned. It also helps bring together disparate data sets. So you mentioned some clinical data and patient-specific data, if that is relevant to the question. It brings together all of that information and does, again, what a human brain can't necessarily do quickly and efficiently. It doesn't get tired. It doesn't have a bias. It doesn't miss things. So it makes these connections and sees patterns and has a variety of different visualizations, dynamic visualizations that help researchers move ahead more quickly in their efforts to find five never-before linked genes, in this case, that potentially connected to ALS, which is phenomenal and very exciting. So as I mentioned, we're really honored to be working with the Barrow Institute. I'm really thrilled that there's a exciting new work ahead of Dr. Bowser.
A lot of work to do.
A lot of work. No more sleep for him still. But really, most importantly, that very important work to be able to help patients like Doug and their families with the devastating effects of this disease, and looking forward to continued work together with them.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Moen. Now I'm going to turn over to Doug, again, one of our patients currently with this disease. Doug?
All right. A little nervous, but thank you for offering. I did ask Bob if he would maybe guide me if I sort of get off track, because I do stream. But I was diagnosed with ALS April 8th, 2014. I don't want to say that it was a devastating diagnosis, but it just made my life different. And I don't know. I want to say that it's been hard, but it hasn't been. I've been very blessed to have an incredible team at Barrows. My wife, my kids. I've got grandkids, and that's why I want to get out and talk about it. And this discovery is so important, because there are people that won't get to walk their daughter down the aisle, that won't see their kids graduate from high school, and it's so these things are really important to me. I've been able to do that, but others haven't. So I am going to refer to some of my notes, so sorry about that. But ALS, I didn't know what ALS was when I got diagnosed. My doctor said it was Lou Gehrig's disease, and I thought it was really interesting. 18 years before, I was at the game that Cal Ripken broke Lou Gehrig's consecutive game streak played. Didn't know I'd have ALS 18 years later. And then this year, I was able to read part of that speech before a Diamondback game, and that was a thrill, because my friend that was at the game with me flew out here for that. So that was, again, I've had so many great experiences, probably because of ALS. I've gone to different training. I've gone to advocate on Capitol Hill with talking to our senators and congressmen. Actually, one of the items that we just were advocating for just got signed by President Obama, the 21st Century Bill. So that's really exciting. My diagnosis took about 6 months, which is actually very quick in the land of ALS. Sometimes it can take over a year. And with life expectancies being between 2 and 5 years, you're talking maybe half of someone's life. But then there are other parts of, there's no rhyme or reason to how ALS starts, who gets it, where it starts. I've had friends that have had it for 18 years. I've also had friends that died within 8 months. This year I'm probably over triple digits of friends that I know that have passed away. And it gets hard, but because of things like this, it's going to help speed discoveries up. It may help me. I mean, I'm not expecting it to, but but it could. There's a very good possibility because I'm planning on living for a long time. I love my life. I've been very thankful for what I've been given. I've had 5 back surgeries. So when my legs started getting weak and I wasn't able to ride my trike to 15 or 16 miles, I could only ride it 1. We thought it was my back. Always expected it to be the back. Well, my doctor thankfully didn't operate. He said, "Doug, it's a neurological issue. It's not a back-related issue." And through friends at my church, I was referred to Barrow Clinic, and I was very fortunate to have Dr. Lotta as my doctor. And the team here is very compassionate. And I also got to meet Dr. Bowser that day. It was, again, fortuitous because we've gone out a few times and talked about lunch, and I had lunch and talked about different products that he's working on, procedures, and how things are speeding up. With Betty, when your husband had ALS, there was nothing. And now we've got
20 years later.
20 years. It's incredible. It's incredible. Even 2 years since the Ice Bucket Challenge, the number of compounds that are being identified has more than doubled. It takes, 8 or 10 to 15 years for a drug from fruition to market. It takes 10 to 15 years. If we can start cutting off some of that time, it is going to be huge. But for me, the personal part is it's going to allow people to live life, to be able. My statement is love life, live life. I want everyone to be able to do that. And if we can speed up treatment drugs and eventually find a cure, they're going to be able to watch their daughter graduate, see them get married, have grandkids. So that's it. I'm also very fortunate that we have an incredible, like he said, a clinical trial research area. I am in a clinical trial. It's a year-long clinical trial. I believe I'm into medicine, but I don't know. My numbers have been pretty steady, but it's really neat that there were 4 different clinical trials here that I could choose from, basically, and the one that I got in is the one I didn't think I'd qualify for, and I'm really thankful that I am. But it's neat to see how that's grown too, because people like Betty and people like the Fultons have created a clinic and the research. Yep. Again, I'm not a public speaker. But I do really enjoy. I want to encourage anyone that's got ALS to go to clinics, because it's proven that if you go to a clinic, your life is going to be extended. And some of that's because you're getting equipment before it's ready or before you need it, or they can plan it ahead. You can get involved with the scientific discoveries. You can work with research. You can do clinical trials. I will do anything to help spread awareness, get attention on ALS. That's my mission now, and I'm thankful for it. I got an incredible wife who supports me through that, and again, I personally think the caregivers have it harder than I do, because they have to help their spouses or children at times, and they got to see especially if they're married, their dreams have changed, and some of them have gone away. Again, I've been very blessed to be able to do the things I've wanted to do with my wife. Some of them were pushed forward because of the ALS, but we were able to do them anyway. So again, this is going to allow people to do that. So thank you, and I'm really excited to see what happens.
Thank you so much, Doug. So again, this partnership and our new discoveries are really accelerating our process, developing new leads, new avenues, and hopefully new treatments for ALS. And so with that, I just want to thank everyone for being here today, and we'd be happy to entertain questions from anyone in the media.
Who else do you share information with?
Who else do we share information with? Well, we obviously share information with our colleagues. We share information via direct collaborations between attending large international meetings. So I was just at a large international ALS meeting where this is where we were first discussing this project. And so there's tremendous enthusiasm around these discoveries and enthusiasm to continue this project.
Fantastic project.
So do doctors that are participating in the Watson program, do they just input all this data and Watson analyzes data?
Well, so I'll speak, and then you can talk about what you all did specifically. So yes, there's a training period for Watson to learn a particular subject area, just like we all have learned our particular career subject areas. So there's a training period which Watson and Barrow Institute partnered on to help Watson make sure that he, she, it understood the topic of neurologic diseases and specifically ALS, and then it's about providing access for Watson to the body of literature that is published on a particular topic, and that's when it goes about finding these patterns and connections that otherwise might have been seen.
Yeah, so it really, I mean, there truly was a initial stage for a while where we worked hand in hand with teams of scientists at IBM and IBM Watson, so that, again, Watson could sort of start to learn about the neurosciences, start to learn about ALS, and then we ask it questions. Now, how can you take that information and glean new insights into our disease? And so it is a team effort and partnership, and hopefully that'll continue. I mean, as Watson learns more and more about the neurosciences and diseases of the nervous system.
So you're continually feeding it.
You continually try to feed it information, and there are different types of information that you can feed Watson. And so we're trying to explore what other types of data and clinical information could we potentially use and upload into Watson to glean yet more knowledge.
I have a question for you, Doug.
Oh.
Can you share with us what it's like living with ALS, what your symptoms are?
Yeah, I'm very fortunate. My ALS seems to be a slower progressing ALS. It started in my foot, and when it first started, I was using a walker, but then I fell a couple of times, hit my head, and damaged the counters. But I did break a counter, but so then I was told I should be using a walker. My left leg is pretty much useless. It's half the size of my right leg now, and my arms and hands are about 75%, I think, at the last visit. So it's starting to move along and take its progression. Saliva comes out of the side of my mouth because I don't have the control now to hold it or to, so that. But I can still eat. I can still cut my food. I can still, even if both legs were, actually the right leg is getting a lot weaker too. I can still travel, but the problem, I don't want to travel because it puts more of a burden on Karen, because she's got to move all the bags. But if it's for advocacy, we do it. So my breathing is a little bit harder. I had a couple breathing episodes lately that have been a little scary. So those are some of the challenges that we've had. Obviously, I don't get to do the things that I want to. This year, though, another thing that was great, a friend of mine got me a stand-up wheelchair, and I hit golf balls at the Phoenix Open at the 16th hole. So first time I hit golf balls in 14 years. So I may have all these symptoms, but I've still been able to do a lot of things that I never thought I'd be able to do. When we first got diagnosed, I didn't know if I'd be dead in a year. So to be 2.5 years into it, and I really do believe I've got at least 8 to 10 more easily. Even if I don't, that's okay. I just live every day. I wake up and I just want to enjoy the day. So whether I'm falling, which I don't, I haven't fallen in 5 months, except for when I have flipped my wheelchair once, and then it tipped over. But again, it's just doing things I want to do. I'm not going to let it rule my life. I'm going to live my life.
Yeah, well, I hope you have your 8 to 10 more years, because I do believe we'll have better drugs by then.
I know we will.
New improved therapies. But again, back to a little bit behind the question of, so this is a disease affecting certain cells of your nervous system called motor neurons. Motor neurons control all the muscles of your body. So as this disease relentlessly moves forward, you start to lose the function of those motor neurons, and whatever muscle in your body those motor neurons control, you lose the ability to control that muscle. And so, as Doug is alluding, you start to lose the ability to use a limb, eventually to speak well, or to breathe. It is a disease then that basically you end up becoming entombed in your body as a patient. And really, I can't envision a more worse type of condition to be in, where you might be mentally just fine, but your ability to communicate with everyone, your loved ones, is lost.
And I'm going to piggyback on that. Again, things have changed so much since Betty's husband had ALS, but even in the last couple of years, eye gaze technology, but you got to train on it before you need it, and be able to speak, because it's very hard to learn. But then you can communicate, but you're still, like you said, entombed in your body, but at least that you can use your eyes to spell words and to do things like that. So that's really exciting. And now they have voice banking where you can use a synthesized version of your own voice too.
Yeah.
Did you, when you're looking at the study, did you differentiate between familial and sporadic cases, and how did you identify the genes that you were looking at in the big picture?
Yeah, so we did not differentiate familial versus sporadic. And, we essentially let Watson dictate what are the important genes to further explore. And so we purposely gave it, limitless bounds, and to let the software itself explore and tell us what we should be looking for. And so we set no limitations in that regard.
You have this big potential source of genes. How did you confirm the genes that linked? I mean, what did you specifically do?
Yeah, so in order to sort of validate the Watson results, then, so we took so far the first top 10, and then we physically looked in tissue samples from patients with ALS and patients without ALS. And we asked, out of those top 10, how many actually are changed in ALS patients? So looking for those proteins that they encode, those RNA binding proteins. And so we saw changes in 9 of the 10. And we could see that some of them actually are in different cell types than we wouldn't have predicted or knew about in the past. So again, it's leading us into providing new insights and potentially new avenues to pursue, both scientifically and also therapeutically.
So this is like a tissue bank that you use?
Is a tissue bank here. So one of my other roles here is I run a tissue banking program for ALS. And so we're part of a national consortium that is doing that.
And clinical trials, next steps?
Yeah, so we will, again, it's not, the next day leading into a clinical trial.
Right.
What it's doing is, I think, pushing us into new mechanistic insights of the disease. And again, what I hope to do now is learn how all of these, this class of RNA binding proteins, how do those individual pathways converge into a particular point in function? Because that's the point we want to target. And hopefully using what's already known about that convergence point, but also maybe with Watson's help and guidance, what are new, potentially novel therapeutic approaches that would then go into the clinical drug development program and start to move forward.
I have another question.
Yes.
To research these genes, do you start with a blood sample or a tissue sample? What generates research?
Yeah, so in this case, we're using tissue samples for patients and controls. We could use blood samples as well, but in this case, we wanted to use tissue samples because whereas a blood sample could say yes or no whether or not it's changed in somebody with ALS, it wouldn't tell us what cell type and where within the nervous system it's changed. And so by using tissue samples, we can tell what cells are making it, what the changes are within those cells, and where within the nervous system those changes are occurring.
Well, how do you get that? Is that from the swab? Or how do you get
The tissue sample are actually collected post-mortem. So these are patients that, like Doug, have been involved in research studies and have opted to donate into our tissue donation program. So it's a critical component of our research efforts.
How is it funded?
Great question. So at the moment, our IBM Watson partnership has been funded through the Barrow Foundation. And obviously support from others, including the Vandenbergs, has been instrumental in helping to fund some of the individuals that have been working on this project. So it's been a large team effort from a large number of people in my group, led by a particular person, Dr. Nadine Bakar, and also involving our clinicians, such as Dr. Latta, who's here with us today, and Dr. Jeremy Scheffner. Any additional questions? Yes.
Excuse me. What were some of the biggest problems or surprises you encountered in working with the data or in training Watson for this project?
Well, I can tell you some. I mean, again, this is the first time Watson was used for the neurosciences. So it has been used in other clinical applications, mainly oncology. The brain and spinal cord are the most complex organs in our body. And so we basically are still in a process of teaching Watson more and more about the neurosciences. And so it was the initial effort of, here's the brain and spinal cord. Here are the very particular aspects that are important for this disease, and getting Watson to basically digest that information in order to apply it to all published information out there.
And I think, just to add on that, I think from our perspective, I don't know if surprises is the word we would use, because we all know that data is very complex. It's dirty data, if you will. Things don't come to us, whether they be in structured data or unstructured data, in pristine condition. And so, of course, at IBM, in a variety of technologies, but certainly within Watson and Watson Health as well, that's expected and planned for. And then the added Watson element is the complexity of language, whether it's written or spoken language. Written a little bit less complex than spoken, because there's not the changes in voice and tempo and things like that. But even in written language, there's nuances to how a sentence is formed and what it's intending. And so we add that, multiply that across all of the billions of medical literature and publications that Watson is ingesting. Again, not a surprise, but an expected complication that is expected with each new subject area that we tackle. Yeah.
So it's literature and raw data.
Watson can, across disparate data types, so labs, clinical information, at some point, data that would impact how Watson would connect is data that should be considered to be ingested, and that depends on the questions being asked and the next steps and things like that. What is ingested, but it really is kind of across the board on what data is out there and how we can work with our partners to figure out how to incorporate that to be able to identify the appropriate answers.
I mean, how many potential genes altogether did you look at? And did Watson identify, did you say you looked at the top 10
Yes.
of those? Have you looked at additional ones in addition to the top 10?
Yes, we have. So
Okay.
for this is a very particular question, and so there were 1,500 genes. So we looked at the top 10, and as part of the question, and scientifically as we were pursuing this, the question was poised such that I could rank order all of them, all 1,500. And so the hope was that in that top 10, we would find things that actually are different in ALS patients, and we did. That's part of the excitement. Likewise, if Watson was really doing its job, if I looked at the bottom of the list, then none of those should change because they'd be at the bottom of the list. So we've looked at some of the bottom of the list, and sure enough, they don't change in patients with ALS. And so if it was a random distribution, then we wouldn't see this tremendous 9 out of 10 at the top of the list and 0 at the bottom of the list. And so that has validated our excitement about this endeavor and the question that we asked Watson.
And these were published, I mean, as you mentioned, they could be data sources, so these were peer-reviewed journals you pulled from and identified these genes.
Well, the genes are in the human genome.
Right.
And so that was well established and identified. But again, what Watson did that we wouldn't have been able to predict was identifying these 5 that never had before been linked to ALS. And so by using its ability to infer using textual sentence structures within the literature, it could read A plus B equals C, and then it saw something D plus E equals F, and somehow thought, you know what, F and C are somewhat linked together, therefore D should be similar to A. And so I would predict that this is a new one that you might not have thought of. And we think that's where those 5 are coming from, those type of inferences that we wouldn't have been able to do ourselves. Yes?
Good question. As you know, one of the difficulties we have with clinical research in ALS is that patients have different biologies,
the tools we have to sort of tell different biologies apart are pretty limited. We can use clinical features to try to do that, but it doesn't work so well. Do you envision Watson being able to tie some of these clinical features into this so that you can kind of correlate a particular biology with a particular clinical feature, like limb onset or bulbar onset?
Yeah, exactly. That's what we hope will be the next step in this partnership, is doing exactly that, bringing in the clinical information that you're providing, and looking for the challenges of the heterogeneity of the disease. How can Watson maybe glean more insight into categorizing and identifying patients with a different clinical outcome?
Any other questions?
If not, again, I thank you so much for coming today. And again, thank you.